Just watch me now.
Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Up My Hockey, or welcome to Up My Hockey if this is your first episode with Jason Podolin. I am Jason Podolin, and today's guest is none other than Dusty Imoo. Dusty is currently the goalie coach for the Kunlun Redstar of the KHL, the top league in Russia, and he was previously an NHL developmental coach for goalies with the Winnipeg Jets and the Los Angeles Kings. Dusty has worked with some big-name tenders like Michael Hutchinson, Peter Dubai, Cal Peterson, Connor Hellybuck, and Jack Campbell. And he is also a former teammate of mine. Dusty was a goaltender for the OG Paper in the Japanese Ice Hockey League, where I actually played my last professional games with. So we go way back to 2004, 2005. Dusty's been a good friend and a real big supporter of me and the podcast, and I couldn't help but just be thankful that he was able to talk with us today. It's actually the second interview I've done with him. The first one was 90 minutes, and the audio just could not be worked out in post-production. We had some audio issues, so he was gracious enough to come back and interview again. And I'm super thankful. We cover some great topics here today. We talk about mindset. We talk about his philosophy, which is coaching, essentially the person versus the player, and talk about relationship building. We talk about building an identity as a player and how to identify with yourself and what's important to you. And we also dive really deep into his relationship with Jack Campbell. Jack has been in the news a lot lately because he's got traded to the center of the hockey universe here in Canada, the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he's had a great start there to solve the backup goalie issue that they were having here this year. So Dusty has worked with Jack from the time he got traded from the Dallas organization into L.A, where he was once a first round draft pick, had made it all the way down to the East Coast Hockey League as a first round draft pick, and was really struggling to find his game. And him and Dusty became good friends and a good mentor-student relationship, and they still talk to this day. And Dusty and Jack still work together, even though they're not technically on the same team together. So we get into that journey, Soupy's journey, as Dusty calls him, and we talk a lot about Jack and his ascension to where he is now, and how his journey will continue. So this is a great episode. I'm really excited to release it. And without further ado, I give you my old friend, my old teammate, and current goalie coach for the Kunlun Redstar, Dusty Imoo. All right, Mr. Imoo. So happy to see you there on the other end. Welcome to Up My Hockey.
I'm glad to be here, buddy.
For the second time. So for all you guys listening, we did this probably a month and a half ago or 2 months ago. And anyways, it was my audio that was all screwed up, and we were trying to fix it in post-production, and Dusty was gracious enough to spend like an hour and a half with me, and now he said we can do it again. So thanks so much for coming back. Take two is hopefully a new and improved version, and we'll have even more insights this time.
No worries, buddy. I think I went to bed at 3 a.m. by the time we finished the last time.
I know, that was nuts. And what time is it there for you right now?
Just after midnight.
Just after midnight. So in the intro, I would have talked about this already, but Dusty is now the goalie. What would you say your title is officially? Is it the goalie development coach? Is it?
No, just the goalie coach for the Kunlun Redstar in the KHL.
Yeah,
and then, the whole original plan was to also help with the Olympic team, the Chinese Olympic goalies, and the development of that whole thing leading up to 2022. I've kind of put that on hold for now. It's a bit of a confusing time right now, so I'm just kind of focusing more on the goalies here right now, and then we'll see where that goes with the whole Olympic thing.
Got you. So for our listeners here, the Kunlun Redstar is a team in the KHL, which is the top Russian league in Russia, but it also has teams in China, which is where you guys are based out of, correct?
Yeah, just the one team. Yeah.
Well, there is only one team in China.
Yeah.
Everything else is
Yeah.
in Russia.
I think there's one in Finland. Jokerit is in Finland, and Minsk has a team. Kazakhstan has a team. Geez, it, dude, you you have no idea the travel. We used to bitch about the travel back in the day. Man, we got to travel from the west to the east coast. It's 4.5, 5 hours. All the 2, 3 hour time change. You have no idea, man. We're talking 15 hours. We door to door. We're like, oh, it's 24 hours. We did the Finland trip. It was ridiculous.
And do you go there for one game?
Yep.
That's insane. Well, walk us through what that's like seriously, or even for the players. I mean, as a coach, it's hard enough, but how do these players dealing with the time change like that and the travel?
It's quite remarkable how the guys do it. I don't know how they do it. The last trip we've been on the road. I'll fill you in later on it, but we've been on the road now for over a month. We haven't been back. Well, maybe I don't know, December 22nd.
Right.
And this last trip we tried staying on Moscow time, even though we would jump to different time zones, but we stayed on Moscow time. Like, so that would mean we would eat and practice and wake up and sleep on that time. So like we'd be practicing at 8 at night, wake. It was the weirdest thing ever. We were just messed up. I can't imagine playing like that. It just blows my mind.
How did that experiment work? Because obviously the game would be in the local time, so wouldn't that be a complete mind screw?
The guys seemed to like it. They actually wanted it. So yeah, they were fine with it. I was messed up, but they seemed okay.
That's nuts. Well, you know what I mean, since it is super relevant. I mean, with the Corona outbreak, you guys were in China, is where your home is, and then you were on a road trip. And if I got it correctly, there was no travel allowed back into China while you're out there, and that was what the extended road trip was all about. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is. We actually, the day after we left, we got word, I think a day or so after we left, word that the league had said no teams were entering China, and so we were going to be on a long road trip anyways, but this has got extended and they moved another game to a different site, and now we're not going back. So
Like
finishing
indefinitely
this,
as of right now?
yeah, we're for the whole season. So the seasons, we only have one more game, and then the regular season's done, and then playoffs start. We don't know yet if we're going to make it or not, but regardless, if we do make it, for example, if we play Avangard, we're going to play all 7 games in Avangard.
Oh my goodness.
change the logo for our home games, and that's it. And
Wow.
then if we win again, then we play Dynamo or whoever, and we play all 7 there. So we're not going back to China.
Wow. You know what? What an epic story that would be. I would love a championship run out of that environment. That would be one for the ages, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's you know what, this whole last part of the season been tough on the guys. It's been a real challenge. Uh, we we dealt with a lot with this year in the travel and it's a little bit different being from Beijing because we're the only team that has to do that constantly, and we never played one team all year more than one time. Like we never played back to back. Like all the teams that would come to China would play us Saturday, Sunday.
Gotcha.
But we've gone every trip and done one game, one game, one game, one game everywhere all year, and it's been tough on the guys. And then then to cap it off with all the challenges, this whole virus thing hit us at the end, and it just guys' stuff are still in their apartments and they're not allowed back, and I've got suitcases at the hotel and I'm not getting it.
Yeah, that's
You-
unbelievable. I know that your family's at home right now, so at least you're not missing your
Yeah.
family. But I'm sure a lot of these guys must have their families there waiting for them, or most of the guys
No,
not living with their
no,
families.
no, they were there, but the day after, like I said, we found out the GM sent a message out and to the families that actually the day of we were leaving that they were allowed to travel with us, and then others came and met us on the road, and they traveled with us, and then they would kind of venture off back home. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
But to get them out of there, um, they weren't taking any chances, and a lot of people seem to think that, oh, it's not that bad, they'll get a handle on it, and it's quite the opposite.
Yeah, that's sad. How is that from a team perspective? You mentioned that it's hard on the guys. Obviously, it's physically hard. It's also mentally hard from a guy doing what you do. It's added a different layer, I'm sure, to the context of a traditional season. How are you helping your goalie specifically through that?
Oh, it was a big challenge, to try to keep them on the tracks. That's kind of my forte, and to keep guys on the tracks and focused and mentally positive and whatnot. And with all these different obstacles coming up, like, dude, there's so many during the season. It's incredible, but it's been a real good learning challenge for me, to try to be that kind of still that same coach, and jump these hurdles for these guys, and move them, if you will, for them,
Hmm.
so they can just play hockey. But you'd have to ask them. But I think I've done an okay job.
Right. Can you walk us through, like, is it? I know you're very relationship based in what you do. I know
Hmm.
you talk about building relationships with guys. I've heard you on other interviews and the one with ourselves. How does that layer of a personal relationship be able to help them through something like a season like this, which is kind of a nightmare by a lot of accounts?
Well, I guess I'll backtrack, and we'll talk again about what we talked about before. If you haven't heard about how I coach, I, I'm largely based around my relationships with the guys, and that connection. And I know the game. I feel I'm a good coach, and I know the position, and I know how to teach today's game. But I base everything around my connection with the guys, and to to delve into this type of a season, it it helped being the way I am, because there's so many things that were happening. If I was just that technical kind of guy, and just hard nose, get on the ice and work on your stuff, I think we really could have went south, and we seem to stay above water through the whole thing, and both goalies have unbelievable attitudes. So um, we just we would joke about it all the time, and we would say, we'd be like the goalie bubble. We just stay in the goalie union bubble and just try to bounce everything off of the bubble, because there was a lot of crap going on.
Sure. Perspective must be a big piece of that. Correct.
Hmm.
Like you said, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of it could be considered negative. A lot of it could be considered, at the end of the day, throw your hands up in the air. But if you can put a spin on it that makes it as a learning opportunity or something positive, um, sometimes that is a big difference maker, is it not? So is that one of the things you're trying to do, is to keep these guys either neutral or positive in a what would many would consider a negative environment?
Yeah, oh, 100%. That I don't uh, I don't blow smoke. When crap's bad, it's bad. You know what I mean? Like, we joke, but I try to make light of it. I try to joke around about it, and we even if we do complain, we complain together, and not like bitching, if you will, but just
Yeah.
we bounce stuff off each other, and you get things off your chest, and I don't try to sugarcoat everything, and turn it into make believe, because then it's not real, and then guys can read that, and
Mhm.
if they know that you're sincere in whatever you're talking about, like when it comes to the coaching part, it just makes it so much easier.
Sure. Yeah, I read the book of the guy that works with Russell Wilson on some of the stuff that you're talking about, kind of his mental conditioning coach, if you will. And he talks about neutral thinking as opposed to,
Hmm.
positive or negative thinking. And it seems to be echoing what you're saying there, because there is a reality to whatever your situation is. And the reality might not be a good one, but if you can apply that perspective from, okay, this is what we got, but now what are we going to do with it? Because we need to still be able to perform, and we need to be able to operate at a certain level. Uh,
Hmm.
that's kind of a different way of thinking as opposed to the fluff of some people with positive, 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 right? At some point, you got to own the
Yeah,
scenario you're in, right? And then do what you can with it.
yeah, yeah. Everybody knows I'm a positive person, and that's how I coach. And but they also know that I try to stay true and real. So when when stuff is bad, like if you don't be honest with them, they'll eventually tune you out because they're just, oh, here he goes again, kind of thing. And you've had coaches like that, and
Yeah.
it's just like the same. They regurgitate the same stuff over and over, and then after a while, you're in the dressing room, and like it or not, you tune them out.
Yeah. 100%.
And so, yeah, I try not to be like that. And you know, I use a great example. I just finished texting with Soupy in Toronto, and I just wanted to let him know, there's tweeting out there right now about uh, Anderson has lost a few games and Soupy's on a roll, and who plays the next game, blah 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 blah, right? And I just shot him a little text, and we communicate a lot still, and he likes it when I talk to him and keep him on the tracks, if you will. He
Mm-hmm.
just likes that little bit of, you know, uh, it feels good, right? And so I just shot him a text and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, I built that bubble around you before, and it's still there, and just, you know, stay on the tracks and do what you do, have fun, and just play the game when you get in the net. Don't worry about all the stuff that's going on around you, because you can't control it. And he just texted me back like just before I got on the podcast, and it just made him feel good enough to just kind of keep him centered.
Sure. No, that's great. Yeah, we should touch on that. And maybe even backtrack. So we'll backtrack. So you and I played together in Japan. And so a little backstory there. I was actually done in Germany for everyone listening, and I decided I was going to go back to university. And when I was in university as a 30-year-old going to university with 19-year-old kids running around, that experience is a whole nother topic. But my phone kept ringing. It was such an interesting scenario with these leagues and places that one I had never even considered before. And sometimes I didn't even know that it existed. And one of the offers that came up was from OG Paper in Tomakomai, Japan. And I was always enthralled with Japanese culture. I'd always loved the food. The history really interested me, and the money was super good. And it was just all signs pointed to, you know what, write these finals from the first semester and get the heck out of there. So that's what I decided to do. Japan pulled me out of this retirement, my hockey retirement, and I ended up on a team with Dusty. So Dusty and I have a connection from that season. Apparently at the time they weren't necessarily happy with their one import. They were only allowed one import in that league at the time. And I stepped in to fill that void and ended up playing 2.5 months with Dusty and experienced like experienced Japanese culture. Tomakomai is on the northern island there of Hokkaido, and it was a very, very, I don't know what the right word is. It was almost like a lost in translation experience for me. Being 6'2" with no hair and bald and walking down the street there in white, like it was. I was stopping traffic, like walking to the rink. It was super, super interesting. Not much English at all. Even within the team, there wasn't much English. But Dusty was one of the guys that was a Japanese Canadian descent and qualified as I guess a regular player, if you will. Correct? Like it wasn't necessarily.
kind of.
Yeah. And and so there's a few guys like there. Aaron Keller was one of them. Rob Miwa was another one. Bert Henderson was another one that did speak English, and guys that I could talk to. But other than that, it was like full on Japanese pretty much all the time. And really enjoyed my time there. But that's how Dusty and I are connected, and we should talk about that a little bit, Dusty, because you being there for quite some time, taking your
Mhm.
career there and then being involved in the Olympics. I'd love to touch upon that again, if you wouldn't mind just walking us through how that process took you to the not the Beijing, was it the Beijing Olympics? No, it was
No, Nagano.
the Nagano Olympics, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
played
let's
in
talk about
'98.
that. Yeah, let's talk about
Yeah,
that a little bit because that was such a cool story.
well, I was in North America, uh, and I'd gotten married my first year pro, had kids. I was 23 and I already had one adopted and two others, so I had three kids, and it looked like I was going to have to pack it in because I wasn't able to support the family, on the salary back in those days in the minors was not great for me. And I got a call from Dave King, and he asked if I'd be willing to go to the Japan League, play there, and try to obtain my citizenship so I could play in '98. And that would have been like '94 or somewhere around there.
Hmm.
And I was like, Japan. I said, I don't know, man. And then he told me how much, and I was like, I'm there.
Right.
I didn't even really see anything but that. I just needed to try to support the family, and then Willie Desjardins called me, and he was going to be the coach. So like Dave was hired by the Federation of the Olympic Committee there in Japan that to kind of spearhead the movement to try to build the B. They were a B pool team into an A pool team because they were going to get a team in the Olympics because they were the host, right?
Right.
And they didn't want to. They wanted to save face and have a good showing, so they hired. At the time, Dave was Miss Hockey Canada, right? So
Yeah, I
they
was going to
paid
say maybe we
him.
should touch on him just a little bit. Even to get a call from Dave King at that point, he was a
Hmm.
very very big figure. Still is a big name in the sport, but he
Yeah,
was
but back
essentially,
then, yeah,
yeah, he was the president of
he was
Hockey
it.
Canada. I think he was, right?
He was it, and
Yeah.
so they spared no expense and got the best, what they thought would be the best. And Dave's idea was find as many Japanese Canadians as you can, get them over into that league, and see how many you can get their citizenships. And so then he also said he got three coaches or so, Willie Desjardins, Billy Moores. There's one other one and I forget. But so he brought some Canadian coaches over, and Willie coached on Seibu. And Willie called me and said, that's where I'd be going, to that team. And we had other Japanese Canadians, Matt Kabiyama, a Japanese American, Dan Daikawa, Ryan Fujita, and then one other import, Chris Bright, and then we had a second import every year. It seemed to switch. We had Tom Curvers the first year, and then Tom Peterson the next, and then just kind of went on. But that was all Dave King, and then six of us ended up getting our citizenships, and I think there were 12 guys that ended up playing, but in the league, but only six got the citizenships, and we played in Nagano. That's kind of where I saw it ending, but the money got better actually as it went along, and I thought I would always go back and maybe revitalize my career back home. But then we had another kid, so I had four kids, and I was like, I just got to stay and support the family because I was making really good money, and I ended up playing 12 years there.
Yeah, that's wild.
Mm.
I want to touch on the Olympics because you had a really great story there. But for the people listening and for some of the kids maybe even listening, like as far as like having a career outside of Canada, it wasn't something that I thought about, dreamed about. Let's say it wasn't something that was really on my radar growing up. It was NHL kind of or
Right.
bust, and I understood the scenario here. But there's one money to be made, and there's good hockey other places, and I just want to touch on the money because that's something that usually guys shy away from. I know all the NHL salaries are public, but it doesn't get talked about too much. And I'll just say my experience. If you want to share yours in Japan, feel free. But when I was in Mannheim, when I went over there, they paid me originally 90,000 euros to play in Mannheim on a 1-year contract. When I left at 26, I think I left North America, and that was as a relatively high profile scorer, in the American Hockey League, and a guy who played some NHL games, at which at the time that translated into about 135, 140,000 Canadian take home. and that was with no taxes, which is usually the case for people who are playing overseas. You don't that money has been taxed already, so it's all take home. They're also paying for your car in a lot of situations. They're also paying for your accommodation in a lot of scenarios. So I essentially had no bills and was making this money, and then plus there was bonuses and playoff bonuses and stuff. And then my second contract moved up to 110. So for me, it was a hard decision because, like you said, you were thinking of maybe going back home to do your career, but
Mhm.
I was almost making small one-way NHL money. I essentially was with the exchange rate. When you considered all the bills and everything else, plus you're
Right.
playing half the games, the workload is way less, the travel's way less. Like there's all these scenarios, lifestyle scenarios that are also incorporated in it. So that's good money, right? Like, I mean, for a 26-year-old
Mhm.
guy, 27-year-old guy, I mean, you can't make that a lot of places. You have to go to school for a long time to make that kind of money, And
Mhm.
so I think for guys just out there to listen, there is a lot of opportunities out there. And I don't know what you were making in Japan, but again, when I went to Japan for that 2 months, I was like, they gave me 50,000 US for 2 months, tax free, and it was like, that's awesome. I'm going to go do this, right? Kind of
Yeah.
an experience that I'll never get anywhere else and be a part of that culture. But I just think it's good because guys don't know that necessarily, right? And it's not always just NHL
Right.
or American League or bust, but there is places to play if you want to find a way to play.
Yeah, well, for sure. And you know what? Like it really changed my whole life. Like the money obviously changed my life, but one thing that changed as well is my whole way of thinking about the game of hockey. I remember when I was going up through junior and I was ranked highly in the draft and the pressures. And by the time I hit pro, like it was not at all about the game. It was about what I was going to get, where I was going to get to, and what I was going to achieve, and how much I was going to get. And then the failures that would happen, you would take them really harshly. And once I got to Japan, the money got really good, and I had a family, and then I had these group of guys, the 9 years in Cebu and then the 3 years in OG, that it was just about the game and playing hockey and winning and having fun, and I just found a whole new love for the game. But I did learn this on my own, and I was fortunate enough that it happened. And now I tried in my coaching. I really try to build that early for these young kids. And Soupy is probably my best example. He was that exact guy that was just toiling in his own head and very down on his life and himself for not achieving. Um, and I used those experiences of mine to help, if you will, get back on the tracks and find love for himself in the game.
Right. Well, that's maybe a good segue. I mean, I did want to touch on Japan, but I wanted to keep this thing under 60 minutes, I promise you. So
Mhm.
that experience there with the Olympics and your story there playing in front of those sold out crowds is really awesome. But, what is relevant now to what you're doing is now you've gotten into this goaltending coach scenario and you're the developmental
Mhm.
coach for Winnipeg. I think you
Mhm.
worked with Hutchinson there and Hellybuck,
Yeah.
correct? Where some of your guys that you worked with, and then you moved on
Mhm.
to L.A. And
Right.
one of your guys there was Jack Campbell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sure on his history, but I believe he was like 14th overall or first rounder at least, wasn't he?
So like 10th,
Yeah,
10th
something
or
high.
11th. Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
goalie language for a draft, that's crazy high
Yeah.
for a team to commit that pick on a player. So obviously very, very highly touted, an amazing prospect. And and you started working with him when he wasn't a king yet, right? He was in the minors, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. He had been a failure, if you will, in the eyes of the public in Dallas,
Hmm.
and went right down to the East Coast League, and we picked up Jack Campbell on a trade, um, and his value was really low, and but we saw something in him, in his abilities, the raw abilities, and felt that if he could get with me, and that there's a possibility that we could turn him around. And if you could, the raw talent he had, maybe you could find something. And for the amount it was going to cost to do the deal, we gave it a shot, and that's kind of where it started with Jack and I, and we met in Vancouver, and just built the relationship in the summer before camp, and the rest kind of, I don't want to say it's history, but it's still ongoing for him, for sure.
Sure, yeah, that path or that journey, whatever you call it, I'm sure he's hoping that it's kind of just beginning now, because
Exactly, yeah.
it. But isn't that interesting? So maybe you can walk us through that process and how you interpret it through his eyes, because to be 10th overall or 14th overall, obviously a massive amount of success, as an amateur athlete. I remember him playing for the World Junior team for the U.S., correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And seeing him there perform. He's recognized by the NHL as being potentially a game changer as a starting goaltender. And in not so many years, he finds himself in the East Coast Hockey League and almost as a castaway. How did that demise happen so fast in your eyes, and how was Jack's psychological sort of reaction with all of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you know Jack, he's a really personable guy and emotional, and everything comes from right here, and he's one of the nicest, truest guys I've ever met. And but one of the things he did at a very young age is he set these goals and standards for himself so high, and then coupled with the fact that he was drafted, he was supposed to be it. So that was what he thought he should be. And so he thought he was going to be in Dallas at 19, 20 years old. And when that didn't happen, and things didn't happen perfectly, he took things very, very hard. And then it just started, kind of coupled on top of each other and snowballed. And then it he took his failures in his just the hockey game as part of his life and himself as a person, and he actually literally didn't even like himself, and he was not in a good way, and he admitted it, and he opened up to me about it. So once I got the kind of the idea of where he was in his head and the real person he was, I kind of knew where I needed to take it.
Sure. So you said high standards, high goals, and I wrote that down because sometimes that's a good thing. Standards and goals is a good thing to build, the foundation around, but it can be crippling, I guess, too, especially if maybe you're not meeting what it is that you had set up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel it was a performance related thing, like that he wasn't where he wanted to be because he wasn't playing well enough, or was he just not ready? And then how did the mindset get involved in that? Because of course it had to get involved in some way, which was affecting this natural raw ability that he had all along.
Right. Well, we all have, even the best players, we all have games where we're not good and we're off and whatnot. As a goalie, sometimes though, if you have an off night, it can get really magnified. If there's nowhere to hide, like you can't hide anywhere in the net when you let in the goals. It's just, that's how it is. And when things go bad, now you got to, that situation and that day where you suck, if you don't deal with it well, it can really turn into something bigger. And then you do start to not play well. And then next one, you're more tense and you're nervous and you let in a couple right off the hop. And now it's 2 games and 3 games. And now, and all it takes is a couple of those. And then the media is on you, and then the coaches are on you, and it can really snowball fast. And if you're a young kid that doesn't know how to handle that, it can get ugly pretty quick. Mm-hmm. But there's other guys that it happens to, and they brush it off a lot easier. And you don't notice it as much because they've kind of bounced off it and just kept going. But it happens to everybody. It's just on how you deal with it, right? Mm-hmm. And Jack at that time didn't deal with it very well.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I've talked about that before. Like, I think some guys, if you want to use the word mental toughness, I know that gets thrown around there a bit. some guys have an aptitude towards that, and whether it is not, whether it is being tough, or whether it is an ability of resiliency and not letting stuff necessarily affect you, it seems like there is a bit of a curve there, right? Like some guys are more apt to be able to do it than others, but I don't think that it's
Right.
something, and I think you and Soupy have proved it together, is that it's not something that can't be learned, and it's not something that can't be mentored or taught. How
Hmm.
do you feel about that?
I totally think that it can be taught, and or I don't even want to say it like I'm a teacher, I'm teaching it, but you can definitely nurture someone and help them along through these times and change their mindset.
Right.
You totally can. I did it with Soup. Soup
Right.
did it. I didn't do it, but I kind of guided him. And I did the same thing with in a different scenario, but with Peter Budai. Um, just before Soupy, we brought him to LA and he went to Ontario in the minors. And prior to that, um, he had come to Winnipeg, and I when I was in Winnipeg, and he was down in St. John's and went a year with Helly and never won a game.
Wow.
And he was just prior to that, he was an 8 year full on NHL backup, never in the minors, and he got traded and never won a game. But what people didn't see was right off the bat when Boods got traded, he was sour that he got traded. Then he gets to Winnipeg and they sent him straight to the American League. So now he's really sour and he never recovered from it. We talked about it throughout that year, but I could just tell like he couldn't let it go because he was this NHL guy and he was playing in the American League. Now he's not winning. And then he called me in the summer and he said, my agent says there's a chance for me to come to camp in LA. And I just signed with LA. And he says, what do you think? And I said, I totally think you can do it, man. I said, and I would back you. I'll tell them to, yeah, bring him to camp. I said, but you got to promise me one thing. If we do this, I said, when you come, you got to let go of everything. I said, you're not the Peter Buda that was the 8 year NHL vet anymore. You're just a guy coming into camp and you're going to try to earn your spot. It's almost like you're starting fresh and just revitalize, like you're going to earn a spot and show everybody who you are again. And he said, all right, and let's do it. And he won goalie of the year that year
Yeah, that's
in
wild.
the American League. And then the next year he played 60 games, I think, and he was like first in shutouts and in the NHL, and because Quickie was hurt,
Right.
and yeah, he returned, and that was at the end of his career. But the whole reason why I tell that story is it was the same. It was a similar situation that there was this heavy baggage or negative stuff that was just weighing his game down in his life and his mindset. And if you have a coach that can first of all, you got to be able to see these things. It's not rocket science, but you got to be open to listening and hearing what people are saying and not just shooting out all the stuff out of your mouth to coach. If you can see these things, you can spot them, and then you can to help these guys through this stuff. And then it looks like you're some great coach, but really you're just helping them, fight through the stuff.
You're listening, right?
Yeah.
That's a very, very big component that is lost sometimes.
Hmm.
Two things that I saw parallel with there as you were speaking was both of them kind of had identity issues. It sounded like, like
Yeah.
Peter identified as being something, and because he wasn't that something, it manifested into poorer performance and not being able to come through. And then Soupy sounded like same thing. He had this idea of who he was supposed to be, and when he wasn't doing that, and all of a sudden he's losing a connection with who he is as a person almost.
Hmm.
So with that identity struggle, uh, which I went through myself too. I don't know if you did. You feel that you're someplace and you're performing someplace else, or maybe you're not, and now it's like, who am I, right? And when you start
Hmm.
these the the person and the player start colliding, or maybe you think that the player is the person, if that even makes sense, and the person
Right.
doesn't exist outside the player. It can be confusing sometimes for athletes when that is all you've known and that's all you want to be. How do we build an identity in an athlete that makes them resilient and strong and confident, yet still be able to go home at the end of the day and know, you know what, I'm okay, whether it was a shutout or whether it was 5 goals
Right.
against, you know?
Well, you know what? It's a tough thing to do on your own if you don't really have the knowledge. Some people, like I didn't have anyone to guide me through that, and I just happened to work through it once I got to Japan. But my family helped me through that. Having a family, it put perspective on the table. You know what I mean? Like it really changed my view of life in general and kind of what my role was. But sometimes when you're a young guy and you don't have family, like guys don't have family. Like I started kids when I was 21, right? So it's not like that anymore. And these guys, and I don't mean to not. These guys are specimens and athletes like nobody's business. Like way better athletes than when we played. But they also had everything kind of laid out for them. They have the trainers. They right from a young age, everything is laid out for them, and then they have troubles when stuff goes sideways to deal with things by themselves. Uh, and so you have people like me come in and help out. But if parents, I don't like parents jumping in and controlling their kids. I really believe in letting them play, but sometimes a little guidance on just say, hey, you know, and not like, you know, you got to play harder, you got to work harder, you got to do this or that, but just sometimes just ease the weight and the load from them and just say, hey, man, it's just a hockey game. You know, just play because you love the game, and I'll love you regardless, as long as you have fun and play hard. And it just takes the weight off and the pressure off. These things, it's you can guide them as a parent that way,
Mm-hmm.
because you know you can't hire someone like me, you know, for a 10, 12-year old, but you can do that as a parent, and that should be the main role as a parent. Uh, you know, I guess we're kind of trailing off, but it does have some correlation as to what I do for a living. You can
Mm-hmm.
do that as a parent. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm decent at what I do, is because I had so many bloody kids.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that is an interesting topic, and it's something that, I mean, I've created a Facebook group, a private Facebook group for parents, like you said, of, you know, athletes. Some of them have kids that are 8 to 10, and essentially what I'm doing there is mentoring that aspect of what you're talking about, right? Like, how do you help your kids through
Mm-hmm.
adversity? How do you help them gain some resiliency? You know, how do you help them start aligning their habits and crafts and commitment with where they want to get to? You mean all this kind of fun stuff that really helps establish a baseline by using the game, something they love, you know, for to teach these life
Mm-hmm.
skills, you know, because there's a lot of scenarios, as you've already pointed out, where there's no adversity for kids right now
Right.
growing up, right? And then they
Yeah.
experience it and they have no idea what to do with it. And parents get involved a lot of the time, wanting an explanation of why their kid is having to experience the adversity. Um,
Yeah.
and that's tough too. I mean, that's one thing that I say a lot is, like, allow them some room to try and deal with this and support them through that. Don't try and fix it and band-aid it and, you know, say that
Right.
they shouldn't have missed that shift or whatever the case may be, right? Or didn't get that start as a goalie, right? Like, how do we deal with that? Because that's going to happen,
Right.
you know?
Oh, for sure. Well, it was, well, I had one of my sons was a goalie, and I I really tried that through that whole parenting all the way from when Jonah was just little on up till he was with me in the American League in the LA organization. That I tried to be the same throughout, and it was kind of weird because I actually translated that over once I started coaching in the NHL and the development role, that I kind of did the same thing. You know what I mean? Like I really didn't change. I remember when I first went to Winnipeg, I said, win, lose, or draw, I'm just going to be me. And took some heat for it because I'm a little bit unorthodox. Uh, some people might call me aloof, I, but it was who I was, and it seemed to develop results, and because I was true to myself, and I stayed with who I was, and I, as when I coached even with and parented with Jonah, and then continued on. And it was kind of odd that Joan ended up with me there for a little bit, and I just was kind of doing the same thing. It was kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you touch on something there, and it's something that's gained some momentum, and that is the aspect of coaching the person first and the player second. Because
Hmm.
back, I think when we were playing, well, I don't think, I know it was all about, one, the result, and two, the asset being the athlete, right?
Yeah,
Like there was no ounce of humanism really involved in anything that was going on there. It was about winning games, and it was about what piece of the puzzle you filled in.
yeah,
But when you start handling the person, right, the the living, loving, thinking, emotional being that hockey player is, boy, you
hmm,
can end up getting results, right? But when you put the results first, sometimes the person gets lost. When the person gets lost, you've lost the player, I think. And it
yeah.
sounds like you've kind of put that on his head. And in the NHL environment, that would still raise some eyebrows, right? When you say, I mean, it's win, lose, or
Oh
draw, I'm
yeah,
doing the same thing. Well, that's not what people want to hear sometimes, right? But
yeah,
am I getting your philosophy a little bit there as like handling the
yeah,
person?
yeah. It's no secret. I don't display it to everybody about how things were when I was in the NHL. Um, but the general census, or the way coaches are, goalie coaches, coaches in general, there's a huge amount of pressure of kind of toeing the line and doing things a certain way, and results based. It's it still is like that. And but I found that I just had a real good success by doing things the way I did. And I thought, and my wife was a huge supporter in saying, Dusty, I think you should just do what you do, and you'll be able to come home and sleep at night, even if they don't necessarily like it, because the goalies liked it, and the goalies were getting unreal results. You know, when I had Hutch, he just shot up, and then Helly, and then Boods, and Campbell, and then Peterson, and it just seemed to work. And they were all different people.
Yeah.
That was kind of neat, because I just would listen to every individual for who they were. But it kind of, you know, if I wasn't writing stats and on my computer all the time, sometimes it didn't look quite NHL. And
Yeah.
but I just kind of did my thing, and the guys and were the most important part for me, and what I could do to help them. So I just did what I did.
Okay. No, I agree. I mean, and I'm coaching the guys I'm working with the exact same way. And I think that is something that is missed a little bit. And when guys feel like they have somebody that's there for them first, the
Hmm.
results come, right? That's the thing. It's not that we're not worried about results. Obviously, you're worried about results. That's what you do. You're in a business where you need to get wins, where you need to have success. But if that's
Right.
not the forefront of the focus for the day, and we're kind of putting that backwards, and then we're going to get the results. I think that's just kind of where at least I view the philosophy, and that's where Travis Green touched on that at the NHL Coaches Conference last spring when I was listening to him. It was a really awesome speech I thought he gave. But he just said that when he's made his most mistakes, he was super open and vulnerable about it. He said is when he's put the result first, like winning first, like
Yeah.
he would then sacrifice the person. And he said that he's really making a bad deal in that scenario, because that's going to hurt him down the
Yeah.
road. When he invests in the person first, the results are going to come, and he has the belief and the trust and all these other great things that come with putting that person first. And I thought that was a really forward thinking thing for him to say in front of all his peers. And I think that's the way the game's going.
Ballsy.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
it's it's ballsy, because I it isn't the norm. And I totally believe that, they still say, well, the head coach still has to have that, line. Assistants maybe a little bit, but and then goalie coaches, whatever. But uh, I believe everybody can take an ounce of this, and start to do what's, Greener's saying, and kind of the way I do things, because you know you can still be detailed, and you can still know the game and coach the game, and be, you know hard nosed at times, but if you really are about them first, they'll follow, man. Like they'll go to the wall for you. They'll do anything for you.
No, that's awesome. Let's get back to Soupy. Jack is. I mean, you obviously call him Soupy. Some people know his nickname, but Jack Campbell. Because
Hmm.
let's pick that up with him in the minors. So because he's a big story right now, especially in Canada up here,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
everyone in the world follows the Maple Leafs, and now he's
yeah.
been the solution to this backup goalie problem that they've had. What they've been seemingly pointing fingers at all season. And so
Hmm.
he's in the East Coast League, this first rounder. You end up getting in touch with him. You guys meet in Vancouver.
Hmm.
Where's the first step of this, and how does his journey bring him back to the NHL now in Toronto? Like, let's break that down a little bit.
Well, in Vancouver, like I said, we I had him there for a week, and we just said we would skate together and work out and do some things. But I said this is really just about you and I getting to hang out, and I just made sure I let him decompress, if you will, and relax around me because he's pretty high strung. Uh, he's a high energy guy, and when he started to feel my vibe, he came down to my level, if you will, and started to open up and figured him out, like I told you, and what was going on in his head. And I just told him, I said this in interviews that I asked him, you know, sorry, let me backtrack. He told me this the last summer, just before he came, he was skating with Helly, and he had no idea who he was anymore. He said, I don't know how to play anymore. I don't know what they, people are telling me to play this style, that style. So I just started playing like Helly. And we got on the ice, and I was looking at him, and I had Helly.
Right.
And if you know how Helly plays, if you know goaltending at all, like it is not like Jack Campbell used to play as a junior, like polar opposites.
Right.
And I said, so I was watching him. I said, do you think that works? And he's like, I don't know, man. I'm just trying. Helly had a great year last year. I said, dude, what? When you're playing your best in junior, the world championships, or sorry, the world junior championships, how did you play? What was your identity? And he goes, oh, I was athletic, and I just, making big, glove saves, diving around, big saves, and athletic. And I said, well, let's start there then. I said, because I can relate to that, because that's totally how I was. I said, I love guys like that. I said, let's start there and just build around that. And I said, I'm not usually one to mold guys or make them into my guy or anything like that. I had, like I said, I had Helly and Hutch and all these guys are all different. And I let them play how they want to play. But he was like, anything, whatever you want, man. So it was
Right.
perfect. It was great. And we just built around him and finding himself again and just loosening up and just I said, let's just get back to that. Making big saves and be athletic and use your skating ability and your abilities and just have some fun with it. And then he wanted some guidance as far as um, you know, maybe someone to look at or whatever. And I said, well, my favorite goalie right at the time and still is Tuca. He's a he's a little bit of everything. He's very composed, but he's super athletic, and he knows I catch pucks. And I thought that'd be a good base, and that was the one guy maybe we would revert back to, and I'd send him a save of two, and be, oh, that's awesome, and just kind of built him, rebuilt him up that way, and
Right.
got in, did it that through when we were in Ontario, and he made the All Star team that year, and you could just see once he believed and once he was just happy with himself. And like I told people, I said my philosophy, and people have asked me this a bunch of times, with the goalie coaching success or whatever I've had, what do you do, or what's you know your philosophy? And I said, love yourself and love the game. And they're like, what? But yeah, that's it, man.
Love
I can
yourself. Love
teach.
the game.
Yeah, love yourself first, and be okay that if you don't play great or whatever, you're still, life goes on, man. And once Soupy got on board with that, And then we worked on his game, and he worked hard, and we do all the work. But he was having a blast doing it, win, lose or draw. He was still having a blast playing hockey, and he was okay with himself wherever he was. He was in Ontario. He wasn't getting called up or whatever. It didn't matter. He was having fun, and his game just kept on going like this. And it's still going like that right now.
Right. So how long ago was he in the East Coast League, year-wise?
You'd have to look at the stats. Like, he was up and down. Like, he would get sent down, he'd get called back up, he'd be down, and yeah, it was not a good time for him.
3 years ago? I mean, it's a relatively short time, right?
When was he there?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, geez, it's been a while now, because he was 3 years ago when he was down in Ontario, I think.
Right. Well, that's not that long ago.
And then 4 years ago,
Right.
maybe.
I mean, to me, that's still crazy. I mean, it seems like a long time, but it's not. To be that low, right, mentally, and kind of be broken and forget who you are as a goalie and all these other things, and now to be maybe starting in front of Frederik Andersen for the Toronto Maple Leafs is
Right.
quite a turnaround.
Right. Oh, for sure. That's another thing I touch on with people is time. Time is, you got to kind of push that aside and just play and have fun in the moment. Because if you tip that the time thing, the standards of time, if you will, and you're watching that, and you're like, man, I got to make it by here, or my career's done, or whatever. It's just going to make things worse, man.
Yeah.
Just enjoy the time where you're at and have fun, like with the teammates you have there, and enjoy the game. The results will follow, trust me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a few things are going through my mind there. One being Tim Thomas, who I think first played in the NHL at 31 or something like that, and then ended up having 2 Vezina trophies and a Stanley Cup, and all the success that he had. And yeah, I mean, definitely the timeline is different for everybody, and enjoying the process makes it that much easier. And I know it's a struggle though for guys, because you're not necessarily where you want to be, but when you can disconnect from that, as you're saying, have the ability, the mental wherewithal to be able to enjoy the process of where you're at that present time and enjoy the teammates, it doesn't become a prison. It becomes more of an opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, and Soupy seems to be a guy that just his teammates love. I mean, even in Toronto already, they're saying, and I've heard it before. Is that something that is that kind of just him, or is that something that he's worked on allowing different parts of his personality to just come through and allow him to be that likable? Or how do you see that, that appeal that he has with his teammates?
Right. I love to take credit for that, but he's a genuine article, that kid. Right. He's a good soul. He even when he wasn't playing great, or he was high strung or whatever, his heart has always been there, and he's an unbelievable teammate, like unbelievable, and he'll be good. I told when I did all those interviews, right when they did the deal for Soupy, I had just flown back to Vancouver for 3 days, and that happened when I got off the plane in Vancouver, and my phone was like blowing up, and I did all these interviews about Soupy and whatnot, and I just said that there was all this stuff on Twitter that, oh, he's not the answer, and they were looking at stats and blah blah blah, and I just wanted to let the Toronto fans and media and whatnot know really who they were getting. When I said they had a gem, and I don't know if people thought I was being a little bit biased or what, but what I meant was as a person, as a teammate, he's invaluable that way. And I thought, especially in the role right now, I believe Soupy can be a starter. I've said that for a long time now. But I think he'll be great in that other role too. And I don't think he'll rock the boat. You know what I mean? Like he's pushing to push Anderson out. He won't do that at all. He'll play when he'll play the best he can when he gets in, and then he'll support Anderson's ass right to the, he'll be every guy in that locker room. He'll be 100% supportive, even if he's not playing. So that's what I meant by they had a gem. I believe in his ability too, but what I meant was they're really getting an unbelievable asset.
I know, and this was a long time ago, what it's like getting traded to Toronto, uh, and it is a big deal, and there's a big media storm there. And now in this day and age with the social media and everybody has an opinion about something, it's even, I believe, it'd be even bigger for the athlete. I heard you
Mm-hmm.
earlier talk about the goalie bubble, and opportunity happens, and we need to be ready for that opportunity. And how do you feel his bubble is right now, and if you can even maybe expand on how you would deal with guys with that, so like with that whole realm, like do you want them to interact? Do you tell them, like, is there a way to go about and navigate that world right now, or do you insulate yourself?
When I mean goalie bubble, I don't mean we're the goalies and we keep to ourselves and we don't talk and everything is kept outside. I just mean the white noise, you know, the media, the pressures, and there's from time to time coaches, or whatever, you're gonna have heat, and that's all I meant. Like all the negative stuff. Um, I just meant that is what the bubble protects you from, and stick together and I'm big, big, big on the goalie duo, and regardless of who the starter is, that they stick together and they support each other. And I had a great example first when we did it with Soupy and Peterson. They split, and they were both unbelievable teammates to each other. They they battled, and they both had unreal seasons. And Cal made the All Star team that year. And then the next year, I had Cal and Boods. We brought Boods back, and they were unbelievable together. But I think having that bubble, if you will, it's more that support of each other and sticking together, and kind of drowning out the white noise, if you will. That's
Mhm.
what I mean by it. I
Yeah.
don't mean segregating yourself.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's what I find interesting about that position is it is an isolating position, though,
Well, it
just in
can
and
be,
of
yeah,
itself, right? It's a
yeah.
game within a game. I put the pads on myself. I don't know if I told you this last time or not, but once I got done, I bought goalie gear. I've always been drawn to the position, and I ended up getting my own gear, and then explored the position through men's league and whatever, and it was super compelling to me. Like, just you're playing a different sport, but it's still
Yeah,
hockey. Like from my
right.
experience as trying to score on you guys to now being the guy who's stopping the puck. And then within even the context of the dressing room, there's two guys that do that. And generally speaking, the head coach is not talking to the goalies about anything. I mean, the practice is
I
done a
know.
certain way, right? The lineup's done a certain way, and these guys are left in the room to experience it and navigate it essentially on their own. So when you're talking about the union, I can totally see how that can benefit, because if you don't have that, at least your other guy in your corner, you'd feel like you're on an island.
Yeah, yeah. And back in the day, it was worse. Like you'd have your goalie partner actually trying to sabotage you, if you will. Like they didn't want you to play well. And
Right.
I was really, really fortunate though, growing up with my first major junior team. I had a really nice guy. He's a 20-year-old, and then I built a really good relationship with Oli Kolzig, and we're buddies to this day. Then then I got traded to Lethbridge, and I was by myself, and we traded for Jamie McLennan, and you know I was kind of the 1A, if you will, and he was the next guy. But he played a lot of games and played really well. Uh, but we kind of pushed that aside, and we became like best buddies. And Noodles and I are still really, really close, even though we don't see each other. Uh, And we really built those couple years there in Lethbridge. And that always stuck with me. And it's stuck with me to this day as a coach.
Yeah.
And it really benefited us when I was a kid, and Jamie, because there's a lot of crap that happens in junior, and it just really was important to me to always to emphasize that to even as adults, to the goalies that are on the teams that I coach, that it's really important that you support one another.
How can we dig into that just a tiny bit? Because I think that's it's an interesting psychological skill to be able to do that. Because with the kids that I'm talking with and working with, and I am working with some goalies and have spoken with them at the youth level, a lot of times they're comparing themselves. The comparison isn't to themselves; the comparison is to the other goalie on the team. And they recognize the fact of whether they did good or bad as if they outperformed the person on their team. And it becomes this kind of mano a mano scenario, whether they pretend to be friends or they actually are friends. Like, that's the first form of comparison. Did I work harder than this guy? Did I do better than this guy? How do you talk about what you're talking about, but get somebody to actually believe and buy into the fact that the better teammate you are to your running mate there, the better it's going to be for yourself?
Yeah, it's a tough one, is it, to kids, because as you know, having kids when they're younger, you can say so many smart things to them, and if they don't want to buy in, they're not gonna like. But you just got to try to get them to warm up to you, and maybe use examples, if you will, of guys that have success like that. Maybe some of these guys up in the NHL or whatever, because they do tend to listen to those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But also, just say, like, how does it feel when you're the one that's playing bad and you're all alone and that goalie's playing well, and you don't have anyone? It doesn't feel very good, does it? It's kind of like the bully thing,
Mm-hmm.
in life in general.
Right.
If you're more supportive of people when things aren't going well for the other person, life tends to cycle back, and karma, if you will.
Yeah.
And I really believe that, and I did it with parenting with the kids, and I try to do that with the adults as well. But yeah, you're right. You're definitely right. It can be more challenging for younger ones,
Yeah.
because when they think they're right,
Well,
they're right.
and
But
let's be
yeah.
honest. I mean, I've seen it at the pro level too.
Oh yeah.
It's a counterintuitive thought process that somebody else who's actually taking my ice time, doing better, and me supporting them is going to somehow benefit me. Like, it's really hard to understand that, but the proof is in the pudding countless times, like you said. I mean, it does help. Success of the team helps everybody at the end of the day, and being a good teammate,
100%.
not only helps you just as a goaltender, but it also helps get you recognized as a good guy. Like we've already talked about Soupy, how his teammates love him. If you're a guy that your teammates love, you have a longer shelf life. If
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're worried about too, right? Like, from a career standpoint, like, just being a good teammate is a valuable asset. And I don't know. I mean, one, it makes you feel good at night. Two, it extends your career, makes guys like you. Like, there's so many just intangible benefits to being a good guy.
Takes a lot out of you, man. The negativity. You know what I mean? If you're playing when I was younger, I always played in the highs and lows like you. So when you're hot, you're unreal, and when you're bad, you're really bad, because you just built you're playing on adrenaline, and sometimes also that negative energy. And I remember even in Japan when I was younger, like, I used to get a crap load of penalties because I was like so uh, emotional, and I never yelled at our players, but I thought that made me better. But as time went on, and even I look back at my my playing self, and I just shake my head, like, all that energy was pretty much wasted. Instead of just going out, having fun, enjoying the game. You play your ass off, but just not always so, negatively intense.
Right.
And sometimes it takes to look back in the past. So that's why I try to use those experiences to coach.
Right. So with Jack, then you think he's ready for this opportunity, showing that he is, his
Yeah.
process and path to get to where he is now. You think he's on the right play? He's ready to rock.
Oh, totally. He's still on the journey. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be ups and downs, right? But and there's going to be some downs because being in Toronto is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I honestly believe he's got the right mindset now, if you will. And he'll have he'll struggle because it's kind of in him to feel things. He'll struggle at times, with the heat and uh, but overall he knows now. He really knows himself, and I believe he's going to handle this really well. I really do.
That's great. And a testament to you too, man. I assume no one's paying you any money to work with him now. I think that's pretty wild though, right? You mean to start off, right? You were on the salary for the Kings, and that's how you developed that
Yeah.
relationship. But now you're not working with them, and you're working with another team, and you're still continuing to work with somebody that you built that relationship with, and helping them along. I just think that's something that should be pointed out, because not everybody's wired that way, and I think that's showing what you're talking about is your philosophy is,
Hmm.
you're
Yeah,
acting this out in real life too. So good on you for
yeah.
doing
Thanks, man. Thanks.
that.
I think I might get a Fleming's dinner.
Yeah.
He likes to take me to Fleming's. That's his go-to.
Hey.
We always have good steak dinner.
Oh, good for Soupy. It's good that he appreciates it and appreciates you. I'll do one more question, and because I've had some people weigh in, knowing that I was going to talk to you, or what's the one question you'd want to ask Dusty to help with your kid, and I can relate to this question because I saw it firsthand in Rick DiPietro. So for those of you who don't know, Rick DiPietro was the first overall draft pick
Yeah.
from the Islanders, which any of your heavier, higher expectation level, if you will. And I was his roommate in Bridgeport for the Sound Taggers, and the goalie coach there at the time was Billy Smith.
And
And
a
Bill,
huge contract too.
he didn't have a huge contract at the time though.
Not yet? Okay.
No, he didn't have it yet. And what the issue was that Billy, and I mean, and again, this is nothing bad against Billy. I love Billy. He was a great guy with everybody, but he was, or at least Rick felt that he was trying to make him into a different goaltender. Right. So the
Right.
goalie that Ricky was drafted as first overall was now kind of being recreated or molded, if you will, to become this other version of himself. And he was really having a hard time with that process and where his identity
Hmm.
was and who he was as a goalie, and should he be listening? Yes, or shouldn't he? And, like that's a big struggle. And that was one of the questions that was come up. Like, what happens if you do run into somebody that's trying to make you something that you're not in this day and age? Like, how do you deal with that scenario? What would be your advice?
Well, it depends on what kind of level. Like for example, if it's just a goalie school guy, and the best thing to do is, always be respectful. I told Jonah, he had other coaches all the time. I never specifically coached Jonah on my own, my son. Uh, and I said, whoever you have, regardless of whether you think they're right or wrong, they're your coach. You got to respect them first and foremost. And you can ask him is it okay to have some dialogue here because I'm a little bit confused. And if sometimes you might get the coaches that are like this way or the highway, then maybe that's not the right guy for you. But then when you hit an actual coach on the team, and I've had that again with Jonah, I was like, you know what, same thing. You need to just go out and do your job. I said you can go out and play. If you feel a certain way is that you feel the best, then go out and play it. Um, if he tells you to work these drills a certain way, then you work them. You just do it. But at the end of the day, you got to play. You got to be true to yourself. You really do. And that's not being disrespectful. As long as you're not being condescending and you're respectful, but you just go out and play the game. I think at the end of the day, if you're getting results, they'll shut up
Yeah.
and they'll just let you play. But I'm not big on having the whole confrontation and saying, hey, well my my goalie coach back home said this and blah, 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 blah. Just be the bigger guy and put your head down, keep your mouth shut and play.
Right. So compete first and foremost.
Yeah.
Compete and try and do it with the class and listen when you have to.
Yeah. You got to kind of sometimes jump these hurdles, but being confrontational and battling all the time, there's no way to battling with your coaches and arguing and stuff is no way to go about it.
Right. Yeah, there's a fine line between humility and curiosity, I think, and growth, right?
Yeah.
Because, we should all be trying to improve and we should be able to look at ourselves as this opportunity, right? But then there's also
Mm-hmm.
like where we do need to find like, well, maybe this is kind of me and I got to be true to this.
Right.
So there's a fine line, there's a balance for sure. And that's where it sounds like it's nice to have someone like you to help navigate that, because there is a lot of circumstances in the game where you have these decisions to make as young men and it's tough to do on your own.
I can also add, sometimes you can tell your young guys, the kids coming up too, like when I talk about building that relationship, if you can somehow manage, and I had never delved into this realm with younger guys as far as players are concerned, like kids in minor hockey, if you will, going into junior, to teach that same philosophy in reverse, really try to build that relationship with your coach. You know what I mean? And if he likes you and that you're trying to be open and trying to build a relationship with him, he might be a little more open to listening to you as well.
No, it's a great point. It's a great point. Well, I think that's awesome. We got a little over an hour. I know you got to go to bed. At the end of the day, you said love yourself, love what you do. It definitely seems like you're loving what you do, Dusty. And I know I love the space that I'm in here helping these guys too. It's kind of it's just a place that makes you smile, and it's such an interesting realm because every day is different, and the science even behind it is emerging, and it's such a new frontier that I think is something that it's cool to be on the front edge of that, helping these athletes really align their thoughts and their mindset with the results and the performance that they want. So thanks again for sharing all that stuff with us. Thanks for being so open with what Soupy's journey there and your help with him. And my goodness, I hope you get to go home one of these days, Dusty.
Yeah. No, I don't know if we're going to make the playoffs, so we'll see. And if I don't, then I'll be making a straight shot back home. But yeah, there's actually Toronto's in L.A. Not too far away. So if I'm home, I'll definitely fly down for that.
Cool. Not to put you on the spot, and you can pass if you want, but is there any parting words for the young goalies out there? Any sort of, if you could give them one tip to how to make the most out of what it is they want to do, is there one thing you'd go with? I mean, I know you said love yourself, love what you do. Is there anything else beyond that?
The base is exactly that, but maybe something more fun to stick with. Have fun making big saves. It's not a crime to make big saves. Enjoy that. The big glove save is cool.
Yeah.
Tell them I said so.
Well, that's good. I'm a big fan of the glove save too. Not a fan of the knob save out there for all you goalies. Hated the knob save. But I did appreciate a good glove save. I felt like he beat me, and not that he got lucky with the knob.
Right on.
Anyways, well, thanks again, bud. A great interview, great talking with you, and really appreciate you doing this for the second time.
No problem, man.
Thanks, boss.
All right.
All right, thank you so much for listening today. What a fantastic opportunity to talk with one of the most sought-after goalie coaches in the game today, Dusty Imoo. His personality really shone through, I thought, in the interview. I thought Dusty has this calming energy about him. He seems really relaxed, really comfortable in his own skin. And people like that are just easy to be around and are easy to share things with. And I think that the clients that he's had and the people that have had great success with him obviously resonate with that energy. I mean, think about the goalie position. This is a high pressure, highly results oriented, very vulnerable position. And you can get really wrapped up in the results and in where you want to be and dwell on the negative. And when you have somebody that has a calming energy and a calming approach and a real person first mentality, I can really understand why these guys do so well with Dusty in their corner. So I really like that interview. I love that we share the same philosophies. I love that we like getting the most out of people and building the relationship first aspect. So thank you so much for Dusty for doing that again. Thank you for you guys for listening today. And if you want to promote the podcast, if you want to do me any favors, that would be the one thing I would ask, is that, you know what, just share it, talk about it, give it a review, and continue to download it. That's the one way to grow this thing, and the one way to get this into more people's iPads and listening devices. So once again, thanks so much, and until next week, make it a great week and continue to play hard. And I look forward to speaking to you all again. Cheers.